Hello and welcome to our next session on essential pillars of trustworthy AI. We are talking about essential pillar number 2, which is privacy. And this, as you may already know, is a dialogue to action series where I've been talking to global privacy and security leaders so far, and we'll be continuing the conversations with other disciplines that make up essential pillars of trustworthy AI. It's my honor to welcome Kouhei-san from Tokyo, and I will let him give you a brief introduction on who he is, and I'm really excited to have you here. Thank you for joining me.
Yeah, thank you for inviting. I'm very delighted to be here.
Would you want to give us an idea of your role at the company you're at, and then we can give the audience and the viewers an idea of some of the things that, what we can expect from this conversation, and I'll go into that. So if we'll be having a conversation, I'll give a quick context on privacy by design and what it means for trustworthy AI and emerging technologies such as AI and other aspects of technology in general. My name is Pamela Gupta, and I am the founder of this series and founder of Trustworthy AI initiatives in multiple organizations, including public ones that you may be aware of, such as IEEE, Cybersecurity for Next Generation, Women in Cybersecurity AI affiliate, also NIST, Cybersecurity and Privacy Advisory Council, besides leading my own woman-owned company, which is Outsecure. So it's a pleasure to talk to Kouhei-san about privacy by design. And my first question, if I may ask you, is what is your view on what it means to be for an organization to have privacy by design? What is the definition, and how can that be made achievable? What's your view on that?
Thank you for the questions. So the Privacy by Design Lab was created by the Dr. Kabukian. She's the creator of this concept. Then we are inspired from her context to bring this 7 principle into the design of the privacy for the processing of the data. So especially for the organizations, the privacy by design is a core principle when it comes to the developing of the strategies, the creation of the technologies and legal matters. For me, it's a very critical approach because a lot of the company is trying to protect the consumer rights, especially for using the personal data, because we become very sensitive to use this data for the other purposes, as well as any threats of the data breach or any discrimination approach. So that's going to be very serious at this moment. That's the same for the AI. We should consider what is the data set requirements. So the privacy by design is a great concept. It's not just for the 7 principle. They try to make the win-win approach. The user, the company is coexisting together to create new things. So that's why I'm very inspired this concept. The organization should include this concept into the design of the strategy or the business. So this is I'm thinking how we can create those kinds of environment to the global business development.
Yeah, I agree. And I am very familiar with Anne Kabukian. She has actually spoken at a conference we hosted last year, Northeast Annual Cybersecurity Summit, and our focus was on AI risk. She's a great leader and a visionary, and I really do appreciate the 7 principles of privacy by design that she laid out. So if anybody is interested, please do reach out and I can share or visit the Outsecure YouTube channel and you can see the recording of that session. She is a wonderful speaker. So if you haven't had a chance to listen to her, I would highly encourage you to do that. So, Kouhei-san, what do you feel? So, those are the principles. Now, what do you feel are some of the ways of making this achievable for organizations? Because anytime it's you take a concept such as security by design or privacy by design, it has to filter through the organization at multiple levels, right? It has to be first, in my opinion, I would say, has to be understood at the management level so you can get the funding and the weight behind it. But then the implementation and the front lines, as it filters down the level of at the organization, it means different things to different people. What do you feel are, who do you feel actually some of the stakeholders are in that making this happen in an organization? And I would also, as the second part to that question, like to get your opinion and views on what are some of the challenges you see around that, around understanding at an organization level what this means, privacy by design.
Sure. In my opinion, it's an ideal just the management level is aware of the significances of to integrated the privacy by design concept into their strategy, because the corporate structure is in the hierarchies. The business operation is sticking into the decision of the management. So the management conception is direct to the impact of the business operation. So I think it is ideal. The management level is a change in mindset. However, in the realities, the operation is coming into practice, right? The direct communication with the customers, the making the products, design and technology, all think this should be the consistencies of the privacy by design. There should be requirements in the practical level. So we should talk together with direct to the management, the practitioners, and how we can cooperate together. Of course, it's not just internal issues because the digital technology is a widespread, not just limited to one single company. It's just been collaborated with the other organizations, entity included of the government agencies, the consumers, or other stakeholders as well. So I'm thinking is that trying to combine those kind of the much literary approach to create new things. So I think that's ideal conversation with those parts of the essences and coming to one single place and having a discussion. It's a kind of horizontal approach. So I'm thinking it's the best approach to organizing of the privacy by design into the practice.
Yeah, I think I definitely agree with that. And I think one of the challenges that I can see is, there are so many initiatives in a company, and there are multiple teams that who takes on this role, right? Is it coming from, is there a legal, typically you see chief privacy officer, for example, in a company, is that's a hat that typically goes under legal, right? And so you're looking at regulations and you decide based on that what is applicable and what is relevant to the business context. But I think that sometimes that may not streamline that whole effort, because of these technical nature sometimes of where who needs to understand it, right, at the front lines level, may not be really looking at it from in a legal perspective, but more from how does it translate to what they are doing, and how do you make that transition from dialogue to action, or regulation to implementation in this case. So it is not a it's not an easy topic to adopt, but it is also very perilous or harmful to ignore. So that's, I think, the balance that we are living in, especially when it comes to the AI world, right? When you're looking at massive amounts of data, and you had mentioned, and I agree with that, the data can be an important fountainhead for uh, bias or issues if they are not handled with the right lens, and that is of whether it is fairness, whether it is, depends on the context. So I definitely do agree with that. Is there anything you'd like to add to that before we go to the next topic?
Yeah, I agree with that idea because I think the policy is quite significant to gather their eyes on the one place. Otherwise, each party has been a different angle, so which is now been a consolidation. That is a big problem, I assume it. So the thing is, we should work on is the trying to make the one single policy. What is the principle? What they need to follow to create idea, create technologies, create a business. So that is very important. I would like to add this kind of the policy making, internal operations, as well as the policy making and sticking to the visions of the futures that you envision through the management level. So that is the ideal. But in a practice, they should be drilled down to how this policy is in a practical approach. So that's gonna be the working and taught together. So it's not just the one single solution. We should to customize in each company's business model as well as the environments of the company they're facing right now. So it depends.
Yeah, I agree. Now, what about what is the focus in your part of the world on this privacy? And do you feel it is at level that that is at the, is the attention at the level you think it deserves?
Yeah, my intention is just I think that the privacy is a very broad context, right? We should try to divide it. What does the privacy means? So that's why we focusing on the dialogue, which means we should be aware to what is the privacy in the context in your organization and as well as the other multi-stakeholders. So that is a very important. We should underlining the one single context into the one team. So that's a very challenging, but that's a very important. As I mentioned, if they have the different contexts, it's very hard to synchronize an idea. Then also it happens in a disparate in their own direction. There is never been started the one single direction. That is a big problem in the business part. So we should do the dialogue with the most stakeholders. Then what is the privacy? What do we want to achieve? And through protecting the privacy, what is the goal that we want to achieve it? So I think it's my focus area at this moment.
That's great. That's great. Now, let me ask you this. This maybe is slightly going away from what we have been discussing, which is data repurposing. If a company has accumulated data, and the business, of course, business units that I work with across different industry verticals, data can be you can be hoarding data, right? Because you feel that let's not delete data, it may become useful at some point. You never know what kind of insights we can derive from it. And in some cases, I should say, not even a case, of course, that has come true, right? For example, for Gmail, for example, when they started looking at offering mail capability, and then how they started offering, they needed that data for some of the services they've offered since then. For example, for learning from it for AI purposes, and autocorrect and all kinds of different features that are very much AI driven, but all that is extremely data power and data hungry, right? Now, that is only going to be an incentive for companies to hoard more and more data, right? Which is anathema for you and me, right? So what would you think? Like, this is a completely impromptu question. This is just a conversation. It's not a scripted interview. We are talking about important things that affect and what we're seeing out there. So in your opinion, how can companies be incentivized to be careful and not collect data, which can actually then prove harmful for the subjects or the civilians or whoever their data subject might be? What do you think? I mean, I'm just curious. It doesn't have to be, there's no one right answer. I understand that, but curious to see what you think on that.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's very challenging because the entire organization, especially for the big company, is in a very different division. Is working on the different parts of the purpose to using the data. So it's very hard to integrate the one things. Upon my opinion, is I think it's very important to make a trust with the customers or stakeholders. So that is significant in the digital age. So what I'm thinking is that try to make a conversation with the stakeholders as much as to know each other. So that is a very significant point. For the data use, it's inevitable because we should create the values for the customers, the stakeholders to use the data, right? The data is not just an spoiling, it's just the kind of the opportunities to create new things together. But the problem is the company or organization and just using the data without any consensus with them. So that is a big problem. So we try to be careful then how we can like include their own processes to provide the data. So that is necessary for that. A good example is the advertisement industry right now. So the many tech giant company is developing the very robust ecosystem, right? So a lot of the data is processing under the ecosystem of the advertisement networks. But the problem is that all the user is not aware what is working underground. Of course, it's the same of the AI that's been processing of the personal data and then just selling direct to the other parties who wants to use this data for the advertisement purpose, but actually user is not aware how it works. So that is becoming a problem. So we should aware that's the kind of the robust structure is sometimes been suffering from the users. The user has been very painful for that. So we should make the conversations how we can improve it, what is the problem is. So it's not the one fits all approach. We should consider what kind of approach is the best that throughout the communication with the stakeholders. So I think it's the best way to achieve the goal of the using the personal data for the future.
All right. Well, I think this has been a really good conversation in terms of we do have an idea of what we should be doing and who to engage into the conversation. One last question, actually. When we are talking about the stakeholders who are at the table talking about privacy and discussing what the impact can be and impact is to be avoided, for example, for a company, are you seeing external partners and external business partners, external service providers who are playing such an important role in any organization's existence today, whether it's from cloud or whether it's hosting services, essential critical services such as email, for example? Are you seeing, or do you see, if you are seeing a trend in bringing those parties into discussion early on, then that's great. I'd love to hear that, if you are seeing that. And if not, do you see the need for that to happen? Or how do you think data externally can be also subject to the same kind of control as we have internally, for example, in a company?
Yeah, true. I think it's not limited in your business area, right? Because the data is been streaming to the other region. For example, I'm living in Japan, I'm processing the data probably in the cloud system. The storage is based on the localization in our jurisdiction. But the problem is data sometimes goes away to the other jurisdiction. It happens, just a different regulatory regime has been applying to the processing the personal data. In that case, we should consider what is the stakeholders. We should scope in what the kind of the data flows, right? So that is a very important before then who could be the stakeholder to talking about it. So my proposal is just to try to define what the kind of the data flows in entire your business operations and plotting which data is in the storage and which in localization, what kind of the regulation will be applied. especially for like the sensitive data should be more protected, then safeguard these requirements. So for example, in Europe is a bit strict, but the US has been different in the States. So we should reconsider what kind of data mapping is the best way for that. After that, we try to consider who is the stakeholders for this practice. Of course, the crowd service is one of the very important, or other things like that you are outsourcing a business to the other partners. They do the work of the same things. Oh, that's the same. You have to consider it. So I think it's very important to understand of the current status of your data processing. Then you're trying to make a transparency internal operations. You try to make a communication based on the accountable accessing it to the customers who wants to like insist of the rights to us. So that's the kind of things that we should commit initial.
I agree. And I'd like to conclude on that. And I think that it is essential for companies to know what data stores they have, what are internal, what are external, and where this data might have a color or a classification of data that may not be regulated, but is essential to be protected. And that, of course, will need the right lens and perspective from a business, which is risk-based, right? Which is taking or doing that risk assessment, doing that trust risk assessment to see where is the data that is residing that could be harmful if it's in the wrong hands or if it is revealed, whether it's for medical imaging or whether it's for facial recognition. The gamut can really be extremely varied and very large. So, all right. Well, would you like to add anything? It was a real pleasure to talk to you. And if you would like to add something and final conclusion, please be my guest.
Yeah, as I mentioned, the impact assessment is the critical, right? Because then the company's organization has a different model of the processing data. I think they're natural. So it's very hard to mention about the one single fits approach. For example, we tried to looking for the best approach, but actually, from my understanding, it's very hard to find a way. So it's very it's not easy to discover the best practice for the company, but we try to explore what is the best way. Well, the data impact assessment is the one way. Then how's your data then been working on your processing? Then how this kind of the data is gonna make an impact to the users, to the customer, to the stakeholders. So I think that impact assessment is not just for the security, it's just for the processing the entire data, and also the impact to the society and consequences. Of course, the AI in this ages, they need to consider more things, not just limit one single company. In the public area, for example, the smart cities, it's in a public. So this impact should be widespread to the people who is even working on the local, there could be the impact through any CCTV camera or something like that. So that's a kind of the very important to understand of the impact before then setting the specific services to squeezing the data from the users. So that's my adding the comment. Then that's very important. We should make in a practice this moment.
Right, I totally agree with that. Thank you. And one of I may be blocking it, so I'll move. But the image for the background for this conversation of dialogue to action series is a public area where in this case it's a facial recognition and surveillance for an airport, for example. So whether it is at the state level, government level, organization level, or personal level, it does affect every aspect of our lives. And so privacy is not about, as Anne says, it's not about, we don't have anything to hide. It's all about control, right? Privacy can be extremely important to preserve, not because we don't have anything to hide or we're doing something wrong. It's also what we don't want to have as a external control in our lives. So, all right, thank you very much. And
Thank you.
I'd like to conclude here. If you'd like to contact us, please look us up on LinkedIn, and of course, put in comments into the post as we make this available. Thank you.
Thank you for having.
Yeah, thank you.